Welcome to our first ever Stephen Platinum Director's Cut. What is Director's Cut? It's going to be an article that I've written. And yes, I realize that me reading one of my articles is not spectacular viewing, nor is me doing this right after I did my workout, as you can see. Sweet brony shirt, though. However, the point is I read the article, but then I kind of fill in the lines and add stuff, one as it comes to me, and sometimes I cut things out of an article just for the sake of brevity. I'm kind of a big believer in getting the main ideas across as effectively as possible. And, to sort of sometimes explain some of my more indulgent writing flourishes. Yeah. So last night, Southern Honor had their big May 3rd show, and they drew 1,000 people. And it was a huge success, and they're sort of touting, and it's very smart. I mean, production-wise and social media-wise, they're clearly the most savvy of any of the wrestling groups in Georgia. Maybe any of them beyond the WWE, honestly. They got the footage of the surprise appearance by Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho out almost as it was happening. It was really remarkable. And a number of people sent it to me, apparently in a sort of a crowing thing of like, oh, isn't this great? Texts that I got from people who were at the show, the most interesting text I thought was more than one person, and is this me putting myself over? I guess it is, saying, what could this have been in the hands of you? Which I took as a huge compliment. Anyway, the name of the article is Triumph and Tragedy, How 15 Minutes of Indytastic Indulgence Marred a Memorable Night for Southern Honor. It is a night that Southern Honor should be rightfully proud of. May 3rd, 2019 will go down as an undeniable triumph for Southern Honor and Gary Lamb. Over 1,000 people paid in various intonations. What I meant by that was, 10 and under got in for free. And then people paid more for the first 5 or 6 rows or whatnot. So, what was the house? At least $10,000 house. Combine that with the fact that they probably didn't pay most of the big name talent that were on that show. Think about that. And you have probably the biggest net in Georgia indie wrestling in decades. Pretty awesome. There were no major production snafus. Somebody actually called me up to say that there was one minor one. But what I meant when I said that isn't just a spurious line. All the major shows, Anarchy, Wild Side, Southern Fried, like almost all of their shows, especially their big shows, were always marred with sort of technical snafus that I can remember. Either the sound quality was shit or video stuff didn't work. I mean, that was sort of a staple of Georgia indie wrestling. Ask anybody. Ask Larry. Georgia indie wrestling meant the production blew. And the bigger the promotion, the more it seemed to suck. And so kudos to Southern Honor and their pros for pulling off a big production thing. I didn't like, I know they wanted like lights out, lights up, Chris Jericho in the ring. They weren't able to really do that because of the way the backlighting worked. So they smartly would play entrance themes and things like that. And I thought that worked very effectively. Anyway, so there were no major production snafus. The main event from Bell to Bell lived up to the hype. I mean, that was a lot. Each one of those guys got an individual video, right? Angels, AC Mack, Shannon Moore. And from all accounts, that match played out very well. The card was workmanlike, though not spectacular. That sounds like a diss. It's just a different way than I book. I always booked, when we had a Sacred Ground, I would literally say in the speech, go steal it to everybody on the card. And I'm not a big believer in always trying to steal it, but your big show is that time where it's like go out there and do it and do all these booking surprises and all that kind of stuff. Southern Honor kind of played it a little closer to the vest, which is fine, right? It's completely understandable. Southern Honor haven't been poker players throughout their relatively young tenure, but instead the professional blackjack player. I used to play blackjack for money. So I know a little bit about that, by the way. Less interested in studying their opponents and outfoxing them than playing the odds, being professional, grinding it out with things that made sense, playing to their strengths of production, promotion, and putting talented pieces in place, and only gambling big when the odds were in their favor. Indie wrestling in general, but Georgia indie wrestling is usually about pushing all your chips onto the table. Southern Honor doesn't do that. They knew they were going to start off pretty big and then just get bigger. And that's what they've done. They don't bank everything on anything. And that's why they've been successful. And they don't really care what other people are doing either, beyond how it affects them directly. But they don't sit there and study what everybody else does or what everybody else is saying. There's probably a lesson there for others. This cannot be overstated. Gary Lamb called his shot. He said they were shooting for 1,000. He didn't couch his predictions or demands as other promoters would. Is that a shot at other promoters that have done promos recently? Yes. Clearly it is. Gary Lamb, it was hashtag SHW1000. There's just no way getting about it. If he didn't get 1,000, people would have seen that as a failure. Now, I know the natural reaction is because he texted me 1,042 paid. Yeah. That number to wrestling people is always going to be suspicious. But the wrestling people think everything is fixed, and wrestling people think everything is a work. It's one of the things that makes wrestling people fucking morons that think that they're more smart. I use that in the wrestling sense. That's why I say more smart than the rest of the population. But do I think they had 1,000? Yeah, I think if you look at that footage, yeah. And the people that I trust who were there said, yeah, it's 1,000, Steve. And so I didn't even question that part. They got their 1,000. He put his word and reputation on the line. Absolutely true. And said they were going for 1,000 and they would get it, and they absolutely did. As a side note, Gary Lamb's sort of money-making big-time event is happening today, Barbecue and Brews, and the weather's supposed to be bad. I hope it is not. I hope that he just has a slam-bang weekend. Yeah. I was privy to many of the bomb-dropping surprises and announcements. I was confident the surprises would leave what was undoubtedly going to be a large crowd, if not a four-figure one, pleased. Certainly the unannounced appearance of Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega, combined with the advertised presence of Cody Rhodes and Shannon Moore, could be nothing but a positive. I still believe that. And Shannon Moore is somebody who, in Florida, he's played out. I see him on Florida shows all the time. But I thought in Georgia it was the right match because that guy can go. And I think putting him in that match with AC Mack and Angels could be nothing but good. Southern Honor's mixing it up with undeniable wrestling superstars. I always joked that the only two industries where everybody is a star or a superstar is pro wrestling and porn. And so that word had been devalued. But I don't think there's anybody in their right mind who would say Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, and Cody Rhodes are superstars, and Shannon Moore as well. Yeah, in a way that elevated Southern Honor going forward. But then it played out. Ooh, so dramatic. Good writing. It started off well, Jericho showing up and laying into Sunny Days, who's also the booker, right? I actually preferred that Jericho, in the role of the heel, made the choice to swing a chair with reckless abandon rather than applying his code breaker. The reason I put that in is because I was sort of privy to the conversations that Jericho was having with the higher-ups at Southern Honor, and he said, let's hit him with a code breaker or two. And I remember reading that and going like, I'm sure that plays to the markish side of the Southern Honored wrestlers. Like, ooh, I'm taking Jericho's code breaker. But if what they're trying to do is get Jericho over as a heel, I thought it was a bad move because they're already going to be so thrilled. The crowd, meaning, is going to be so thrilled with Jericho being there that him applying the code breakers, oh, it's so cool, it's so cool. It's like that scene in Ready to Rumble where, Sting beats up a bunch of guys, and then the two marks are like, punch me, right? It was smart. The last smart choice made, as it turned out. Ooh, harsh. Inevitably, there would be some Jericho chants, as he's the biggest star they've ever had in the promotion. By the way, the video of that, you could find it anywhere. I'm not going to put a link to it because I'm sure they're going to throw it out there. And I don't want to like piggyback on their video. It's theirs, right? It was smart, blah, blah, blah. Inevitably, there would be some Jericho chances. He's the biggest star they've ever had in the promotion. But Jericho seemed fit and determined to not be cheered, but instead put one of Southern Honor's biggest baby faces in peril. Great. Then Kenny Omega showed up and brought the fire, and it capped off what should have been a perfect evening, or at least a perfect segment for Southern Honor moving forward. The word on the street was, people who were messaging me, was that the card was pretty forgettable and boring, in the sense that they didn't really go for slam bang boom, but instead sort of advance things in a very workmanlike way. I think Dylan is showing that he's also a pro as a booker. He's not, this is going to sound like a slight, and I guess it is, he's not the reckless, confident artist that I was, nor is he the scientist that Bill Behrens is. I've always said that Bill Behrens thinks wrestling is science. I think that it's art, and the truth is somewhere in between. Last night, I'm sure that Dylan played it more to the science side. He played not to lose, which I'm not a big fan of, but I get it. You don't want to botch it, right? Which inevitably, what happens when you don't play to lose in a sport? You lose. Yeah. And I think that's what happened at the very end here. Simple, if not spectacular, Omega routs Jericho, and everybody who matters put their stamp of approval on sunny days in Southern Honor. At that point, they can get to work putting over all the major Southern Honor angles moving forward through a raucous brawl. I love a big brawl. I used it in PCW very sparingly, but when I used it, it was always super memorable, right? Everyone wins. AEW gets their shocking appearance and great footage. Southern Honor attaches themselves to the second biggest wrestling group in the country, parentheses, by proxy, as AEW still hasn't done anything. But the pro wrestling landscape in the states behind WWE virtually doesn't exist. This is a whole series of articles by itself, but I believe this. AEW is in a great spot to give us some wrestling news beyond WWE that doesn't bore us all to death like Impact. Now, people are already sending me stuff about how mad they are about that I said that. Impact's doing really good stuff. Nobody cares. I think here's the truth about Impact. It doesn't matter if they do good stuff because everybody knows they're on life support. Everybody knows they only exist because they need to exist, not because they are thriving and they don't have the potential to thrive. Is that the truth? Yeah, it is. And or reveal how they are more exploitive than explosive like Ring of Honor. That's a controversial line. What do I mean by that? I think all the word that I've gotten about Ring of Honor is that somebody described it as a marketing pyramid scheme where basically Ring of Honor exists, it seems to exist to basically get a bunch of wrestlers to pay them a bunch of money to maybe get a spot on the show. That they don't feel big league anymore. Obviously, they have the problem of if they ever make anybody worth a damn, they're gone. They suffered the same way ECW suffered and a bunch of other groups suffer, and groups suffer in Georgia by being the 3-horse in a 3-horse race. And now it's really a 1-horse race, and everybody's hoping AEW is going to be enough of a horse that it can actually get up to the starting line. Yeah. Ironic because the Kentucky Derby is today. And that is actually the definition of irony for those who are trying to correct me already. And in front of their biggest audience to date is being able to launch, sustain, and ferment angles that could go on for months and years. I cannot overstate this. This was their chance with a national spotlight. And, you know, Southern Honor is smart. They'll produce the videos in such a way going forward to take advantage of all this to the maximum extent. I don't deny that. But I'm saying, you know, they had a chance to really launch all of their angles into the stratosphere. And it just seemed like a missed opportunity. Instead, they killed their triumphant heel champion dead. There's just no other way to put it. Whatever was accomplished by Alan Angels winning that match was completely lost in a game of sending the people home happy and giving the people what they want, which was indulged to such a large degree by seemingly every babyface, every AEW wrestler, every audience member, Al Haft and the other original founders of the National Wrestling Alliance. I almost put the what they called that group, but one, I wasn't 100% sure I knew it off the top of my head. I couldn't find it on an initial search, and I realized that joke would be lost on everybody but me and 3 other people, so I put Al Haft and the original members of the National Wrestling Alliance. And every Make-A-Wish kid John Cena ever visited who are still with us. Wow. It's fucking harsh as shit. That's funny as hell, though. Fuck you if you don't like that. Hitting their finisher on the now hapless, impotent, and ruined champion. That's how bad I think that segment was. I think they just basically threw their champion in the trash. And apparently he was sort of in on it, where the mark in him came out, and these WWA 4 guys, and I don't know for sure Alan Angel's a WWA 4 guy. The one bad thing about them is apparently they're just marks, and they're marks for themselves. And the whole segment reeked of just markdom. Perhaps this is the price of having big-name talent on your show who are helping to cap a fantastic, undeniably successful evening. Perhaps this was a young booker being exposed as somebody who is so blinded by the opportunity that he didn't feel empowered to maximize it. I can only speak of myself and Sacred Ground 1. I worked with Samoa Joe to come up with an angle that made sense, and he wrestled Jay in a 50-50 match. Everybody else who was outside talent lost. I had to go to the mat and fight Awesome Kong to lose to our person, but I did it. Fuck her, right? And she was a real bitch about it too. She said, quote, "I don't make stars." Well, I fucking made her make 2 that night. Fuck her, right? Colt Cabana lost to Nemesis. El Magno lost to Phantom, right? The only other payoff that I felt the need to do was Dwight Power, who had wreaked havoc and cut all these horrible promos about gay wrestlers and all this stuff, did lose to Cassandro. Yeah. Perhaps this is the strongest indicator yet that talent, no matter how successful or smart, can rarely see beyond themselves in what they want. Whatever the case, history will always say that Southern Honor drew 1,000 plus. The card was not overly remarkable, but nobody notably dropped the ball, and things were advanced enough from the undercard that any number of those 1,000 plus people have a reason to continue to come. But that last indelible image of Kenny Omega shooing aside Southern Honor's fantastic heel champion dismissively at the thing where he actually brushed him with his foot and sort of shoot him out of the ring, and then whatever he said was fucking terrible. And I can't believe Kenny Omega indulged himself in such a way. He's such a smart guy about wrestling. Fuck, I hope he feels bad about that whole thing looking back, because it was shit. Couldn't help but invoke that image of defeat being snatched from the jaws of an assured victory. I had to go over that line again and again and again to make sure I was saying it right, because I fucked up stuff in the past. But yes, that's right. It's defeat being snatched from the jaws of an assured victory. Got it. The foolish will say that I'm exhibiting some kind... I almost didn't have this paragraph, but one, I think it needed a stronger close. But 2... I'm always amazed at how, and it's sort of a product of the modern day that we live in, right? It's not Donald Trump is an idiot. It's that those people have an axe to grind. It's not that, global warming or climate change is a real thing. It's that, well, they're getting some money. There's always an angle. The whole country has become pro wrestling people, where they just see a conspiracy behind everything instead of seeing things on their merits. Yeah? So I put this here, and I think it's really good. The foolish will say that I'm exhibiting some kind of sour grapes or signs of being jealous or writing this merely to provide a controversial counterpoint. The intelligent will be able to separate themselves from their emotions and see what I have written for what it is. Help to whomever will take it. A lesson for those smart enough to heed it, and a harsh reminder that creating and establishing something worth protecting is only half the work. That you actually have to protect it and nourish it as well. This has been the first Stephen Platinum's Director's Cut.